This week was important because this was the first week we had crucial primary elections after the death of George Floyd and during the Black Lives Matter protests. And it can be seen that these protests are having an impact on our elections. So we had elections, primary elections in Kentucky, Virginia, and New York. It gives us an insight into what we can expect come November.
All day you will be safe. Alter your vote.
Voters in Kentucky, New York, and Virginia cast their ballots yesterday in those states' primaries.
So starting off with Kentucky, you had a Democratic primary between former Navy Air Force pilot Amy McGrath. She was backed incredibly by the Democratic establishment up through the past few years, kind of getting her ready to take on Mitch McConnell, who's the Republican Senate Majority Leader.
Learned that Amy McGrath will be running against Mitch McConnell for his Senate seat. Is he vulnerable? I don't know.
Not necessarily, but if there was any Democrat who could probably mount a well-funded challenge to McConnell in the coming year, it's Amy McGrath. Remember, she was one of those star recruits for Democrats last year during the midterm elections to run in seats that suddenly became competitive.
Good morning, George. Well, across the country, the pandemic and the push for racial equality are upending congressional races. Today, we will see the first real test of that in these primaries in New York and Kentucky, where the race to take on the Republican leader Mitch McConnell appeared to be settled. Now is anything but.
But you had a late surge from a man by the name of Charles Booker, a former Kentucky House of Representatives member, and he's made a late push to take on Amy McGrath. Now, elections happened on June 23rd, and currently, as I'm filming this, the date today is June 27th. So because everyone's voting by mail and through absentee ballots, we're still waiting to get a lot of the results in. It looks like it's going to be a really close race. There are few votes between them right now. Only about 14.7% of all precincts are reporting in right now, so there's still a large portion of the votes that need to be counted. But no one thought Booker had a chance up until a couple weeks ago. He started to get a ton of funding in. And part of the reason we see this late surge is because McGrath, a lot of Democrats feel like she isn't representative of Democratic values.
I think many Kentuckians are tired of both political parties, and I feel like they are looking for somebody who believes in things like character and courage and honor. But the biggest difference is, I will work with any president to do what's right for Kentucky, no matter whether he or she wears a red jersey or a blue jersey.
She's flip-flopped on the issue of whether or not she would have confirmed yes or no for Brett Kavanaugh. This kind of Democratic progressive wing has rallied around a black candidate that is Charles Booker. In New York's 16th district, you had a race between Jamal Bowman and Eliot Engel, who's a 30-year incumbent in the House of Representatives, and it looks like he's going to get primaried. Jamal Bowman has just blown him out of the water here, and considering this district has a Cook PVI of D+24, it's likely that he will be elected in November unless something dramatic were to happen. I'll just interrupt myself to explain what the Cook PVI is. Basically, it's a measure of how strongly a congressional district leans Democrat or Republican, and it's calculated using the past two elections compared with the national average share for elections. And then we get a number and we use that to judge how strongly a congressional district leans one way or another. In New York's 17th district, you had Democrat Mondaire Jones taking on another Democrat, Adam Schleifer, who's the son of pharmaceutical company billionaire Leonard Schleifer. So Mondaire Jones is a former Obama administration DOJ official, and he's 33 years old, he's young, he's African American, and it looks like he will also win this seat as well. This is going to be a bit more of a contested seat. This seat leans D+7. Then in Virginia's 5th district, you had Democrat Cameron Webb, who looks like he's going to win. Webb would be the first black physician to be elected into office in the House of Representatives if he is to win in November. This is going to be a tight race because Democrats for a while haven't really considered this seat viable until only recently. You had Denver Riggleman, who was the previous incumbent in that seat. He was ousted because he officiated a same-sex wedding. And so now Republicans have put forward candidate Bob Good, who hasn't done very well raising a lot of money. So it looks like Cameron Webb is going to be in a really tight race with Bob Good in a general election. And this district has a Cook PVI of R+5, so it's a lot more contested. But Democrats do feel like this is one seat that they're going to be able to take back. And it symbolizes, again, how young black candidates did on Election Day on June 23rd. And we might see that replicate out in other races. So what I want to get to is this idea of the Democratic tent. And so now you're seeing young black progressive candidates being put forward and are winning elections. So in 2018, you had a wave of women who were elected into the House of Representatives. Now it looks like with Black Lives Matter protests coming out, there's more of an urgency and a demand to put forth black candidates into the center stage. And it gets to this idea of what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was talking about on Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj, is what is this tent of the Democratic Party?
Is the Democratic Party tent too big?
Well, I think in any two-party system, the tent is going to be really big because what it does is that it squashes dissent. But I do think that there are areas where when that tent gets so big, you squash actually talking about issues in substantive ways because you're not supposed to critique moderate Democrats. I think there's a strong ideological split in the Democratic Party, yes.
And you're seeing a split between kind of the establishment moderates of Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, and then you have this progressive wing, which has won a lot of elections this week and in the past couple weeks. And now you're starting to get a sense like, how is the Democratic Party gonna fit itself all together? You had this problem in 2016 with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. And you're going to see that definitely play out in 2020. As the voting population gets more youthful, it tends to swing more progressive. Gen Z is starting to vote more, and that's going to shift the Democratic Party as a whole. In Kentucky, it's whether or not you have a moderate Amy McGrath to take on Mitch McConnell, or are you going to have Charles Booker, who is going to turn out young African-American voters who feel like the Democratic Party have left them, but that Booker is a better representation of him. And you might actually see record turnout in a much more liberal, younger demographic. So you can kind of see the push and pull here. The establishment is backing one candidate, the progressive wing is backing another. There's one more race for you to keep an eye on. In New York's 12th district, you have the chair of the House Oversight and Reform Committee, Carolyn Maloney. She has a 1.7% lead over Suraj Patel, who's running again in that district. He also ran again in 2018 and lost substantially. This time he's mounted a much closer race. He describes himself as an attorney, activist, business leader, and lecturer on business ethics at NYU. He's only 36. So again, you're seeing these younger, more progressive candidates come forward, and they might actually gain seats. There was one reporter who called this kind of shift away from New York's old wing of Democrats to the newer. And we're definitely seeing that in these primary elections. Thanks so much for watching. After you like and subscribe, tell me in the comments whether or not you think the Democrats will hold the House in 2020, and do you think that progressives are going to gain more or less seats?